Oh man, and that's a great way to start, isn't it?
It always is.
Laughing.
We didn't catch it, but
Yeah. Christi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great. I thank you for coming tonight, man. It's awesome. I can't wait to talk to you. So yeah, Christi Myers, let's just jump in. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I've spent the last 20 years in emergency medicine in numerous different sectors, to include private ambulance, fire department, sheriff's department, Department of Defense, and ultimately earning tenure as a professor. And
Wow.
that's where ketamine actually found me.
Where were you teaching, if you don't mind?
I was teaching at a community college in Victorville,
Oh, cool.
Valley College. I taught paramedicine, so I taught anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, and the theoretical side of medicine. And ketamine entered my classroom.
That's
I
awesome.
lectured on ketamine for about 4 years prior to building Flow.
wow,
That's great.
In that regard, were you just lecturing on, I guess, the anesthesia part of it, or were you talking about the full ketamine therapy?
Well, the ketamine therapy was born from the lecturing and understanding the way that it impacted the limbic brain, while concurrently witnessing the mental health crisis, PTSD, suicidality. It was all a compounding of events. And for us, for first responders, we actually use it for pain management.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so any ambulance right now, or most all ambulances, fire departments, they're carrying ketamine as a standard of care.
Ambuli.
I don't know if you wanted to let us know that.
Yeah.
I found a source, guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, new idea. Yeah, no. No,
They
that's
give it way too fast. It would not be a pleasant experience.
No.
You know what's funny though is we're all kind of probably similar in age, and I remember just too vividly when all this shit was highly illegal, and everyone was like, no, you can't, it's all drugs, you're all drug addicts. So for me, this whole renaissance we're going through with all of these compounds is truly disconcerting, if I'm being completely honest, right? It's hard to swallow because I'm like, no, it's bad.
God, man. The first time I walked out of a weed shop when it went medical, I'm
Sure.
like, do I just walk to the car with this? And it was weed, It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a psychedelic. It wasn't a dissociative. It was just weed.
Well, there was a lot of misinformation. And so what has been and is still dissolving is that misinformation.
Yeah.
War on drugs was very intentional. And we are
Drugs won.
We are the consciousness, right? So all of the plant medicine that's just making its way back again full circle is in hopes that we deepen our understanding that it innately lives inside of us.
Right.
And we have those experiences if the receptors didn't exist. And so all we're doing is truly tapping into a field of potential, which is our own innate intelligence. And that's where we're debunking and dissolving these false narratives that were truly programmed into the large majority. It's very fast.
That's exactly, you hit the nail on the head. It's programmed, right? This was all just false programming. I mean, and that's why I said you have to kind of be around this age to appreciate how weird this position is. Because if you talk to my 16-year-old, none of this is weird at all. In fact, vape pens are in everyone's pocket, right? Not like the nicotine ones, but the weed ones.
We want the 16-year-olds necessarily to have their pocket,
I don't, but
what are you going to do?
I mean, that's the world that it's legal. It's on every shop downtown. What are you going to, it's just as normal as sneaking a beer when you were 16, right?
Yeah.
It's okay.
Right.
Although I would much rather have the vape pen than a warm Coors Light,
Well, the fascinating thing with that too is that we don't really give any kind of awareness to drugs that are normalized, right?
Mm-hmm,
so caffeine is one of the most widely used drugs in all of the land.
Widely abused drugs in the
For
whole land. Forget
sure.
about used. I
For
mean,
sure.
You know,
You wanna-
Michael Pollan had an ebook on that, or an
Yeah.
Audible book on that. And it was a fascinating little discussion about that, specifically saying exactly what you're saying. We don't demonize it because it's on every corner and it doesn't seem to interfere with our work.
and then we'll sprinkle some sugar on it,
Yeah.
add some milk to it, and call it nutrition. The other fascinating thing is what we would see if we actually took that away from a large majority. You want to see people's addiction cycle,
Oh,
take their
yeah.
coffee away, take their phone away, and pull some sugar out of the house, and you'll
Oh, yeah.
see
It's
the
fucking
relationship
anarchy, dude.
level of addiction
Yeah.
that we normalized.
Oh, yeah. You
100%.
talk about the decline of human society right there. Close all the Starbucks and get rid of all.
About 3 days later, everybody mellowed the hell out.
Yeah, I mean,
we
yeah,
were rough
if
3
we
days.
made it that long. Yeah. It's funny. We talked to a lot of people on the show, and like somebody who's I'm trying to get on the show right now, and I had a conversation literally today about there is a growing corpus of what he calls evidence that DMT is actually a communication enabler to an alien species. Specifically, like it's just basically.
Oh God, that's going to be a weird ass conversation. I'm definitely going to have to be high for that one.
Yeah, but it's like, because we have this expanding acceptance of all these different compounds, we also get a new expansion of narratives around these compounds. And that's
for
what
sure.
I have found to be really interesting, because now
For sure.
DMT is not just a psychedelic, it's literally my walkie-talkie to another universe, right? Like, I'm like, okay, well, could be.
Well,
I could buy into that theory.
here's
I don't know. Who am I to say? Like,
the clarity on that is it's always accessible.
sure. And
Yeah.
that's right.
You just have to be quiet enough to listen.
Which nobody is, for sure.
No,
Yeah.
well, there's this much, right?
Yeah, that
the
much.
1% are those who are truly trying to tap into their highest states of consciousness. You can release DMT endogenously or naturally through breathing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The other thing
Yeah,
are
we did. Tom and I actually did shamanic breathing, and I was every bit tripping my balls off. Like, I was like, and this was deep, 45 minutes of straight hardcore shamanic breathing. And I was like in another universe. Like, I wasn't even, forget about any drugs I've ever done. This was,
Well, here's the contemplation for you, because we can show that DMT enters the pineal gland at 49 days in utero. So everyone who is alive right now has had
Wow.
a major
Oh,
bolt
dude.
experience of
Sturgill
DMT.
Simpson's song, 49 Days.
Divine Day Vacation.
Divine Day Vacation. It's
Yep.
about reincarnation in that case.
And
So
that's
let me ask you something. What is it doing in the pineal gland at 49 days? Like, what's
that's
happening? Like,
consciousness.
it's what?
As consciousness enters the cell body.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's an organized cluster of cells until there's spontaneousness of consciousness, which then
Wow.
you have the sentience of our being, which then manifests into a human.
So
Huh.
there's a reasonably cogent argument to be made that DMT is sort of the foundation for consciousness, not just an
100%.
ingredient.
And so when we work with DMT, there are certain humans walking Earth right now that is their connection is to ETs, right? Or if we
Huh.
want to call them aliens, depending on what movies we've watched, or, influences by different cartoons over our lifetime. But the entities or ETs or higher beings, even angels and other dimensions, are always present. It's our ability to get quiet enough and to release our own inner intelligence to connect with the information. It's the quantum field, right? And through that quantum field, everyone has their own interpretation, and each person has accessibility to the information that's right for them.
But here's what, let's talk about this for a second, because I think this
Yeah.
is a great,
I love it.
this is a great way, this is a great inflection point in the entire conversation, because Tom and I do a show on this. We talk to a lot of people in a lot of weird places that do a lot of weird things.
places.
right? And Tom and I started doing this show because we were also visiting a lot of weird places and doing a lot of weird things and talking to weird people. So you might say that our latitude allowed to this type of thought process and descriptions, even the words you're using, right, there's a lot of people out there, false programming or whatever the reason is, that hear words like that and are like, this chick is crazy. Like that. I mean, that is like absolutely.
I
like,
would say that as a positive, though, Christy.
No,
if
of course.
If I ever said that,
No,
that would be
I did
a
lot of work
compliment
no,
coming from
that's
me. I'd be like,
that's
she's
Tom and
nuts.
I.
This is great.
Yeah, no, Tom and I, 100%. But here's the problem. Like so many people, I don't think necessarily, I guess here's where I'm going with it. I don't think as many people are closed off to the capacity for change in this regard as there are people that are closed down because they just don't even believe that it's possible because these words sound fucking crazy.
For
Right?
sure.
Well, but even that, like, we can talk about religious programming, societal programming, all that stuff is really kind of, no, you got to go through this guy who happens to wear a dress and might touch children. Sorry, Christy. Like, I hope I'm not.
Well, those are
She's like,
extreme examples.
No, I'm 100% behind.
Perversion in our society. We have deep distraction, distortion, misinformation, and lies and destruction. But there's also the resonance of truth as information. And right now, it's readily available to us. I often tell my children, ignorance in this day and age is a choice. There is so much access to information. And it's like, well, if you have these preconceived thought processes, where'd you get the information?
Right.
Is it your truth or is it your trauma? And is there discernment around those two? We can show now that DMT is a latent or dormant system inside of all of us. It lives plentiful in the lungs, in the cerebral spinal fluid. You'd be fascinated to see how many people don't know anything about their own physical body.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like we're in a massive crisis right now with autoimmunity and cancer and disease and dysregulation. And we're normalizing it as a society as if it's just an
you just get cancer.
Yep, we're like, I'm just waiting for cancer. And you're like, holy shit. And so with that being said, when truth resonates in the physical body, there's this innate knowingness that starts activating that wisdom that's inside of all of us. And so it's one of those things, if it does trigger you or bring up those feelings in you, to really sit with that and be like, okay, why is this triggering me? Is this information truth resonantly? And if I don't believe so, then am I willing to do the research around it? Or am I just going to stay in my judgment?
Right. So, Christy, that's an interesting philosophical question you bring up there, because, like, clearly, I mean, I think all of us would agree that there's a large portion that wishes to stay in that ignorance. What is there for them? Why is that holding on?
It's karmic propensities, right? So everyone's on Earth developmentally. This is a giant school, if we haven't figured that out yet, right? I'm in Life University, guys, full-time student, 44 years on Earth, right?
Yeah.
And here's what I've come to learn. And it is through a lot of different forms of suffering. And so it's very fascinating to me to witness that consciousness. I'm not sure if you've done any studying around Dr. David Hawkins and his contributions to the map of consciousness. And he languages very beautifully the different lenses of reality as it pertains to the human being at their level of consciousness.
So I read a bunch of his books, and Power versus Force is amazing.
Yeah.
There was a couple of statements he made. Maybe this is my own biases, but he kind of threw some weight behind the O'Reilly factor in one of the books. And he was like, this guy has the no spin zone. And I'm like, the guy that just, paid money to hush up somebody that he sexually harassed or something. And I was like, I can't, that's where the wheels fell off of that bus for me. And I stopped. That's like 4 books in. And I like literally The Eye in the Eye. I read all of them.
For sure.
And I was like, God damn it. Why is he backing this guy?
Yeah.
Well, and he has some statements about Cosby before all that stuff was released about Cosby. But what I've come to hold as my truth,
that's right,
with some of these true, they also bring in their opinion.
Sure.
We all can influence it, right? And so for him, he really teaches discernment and the resonance of truth. And as we work with different teachers, and at sometimes we do speak out of our unconsciousness or out of our ignorance.
Totally.
I find
Yeah, that
myself
makes sense.
Because
I'm
you're a
like,
human
oh,
being.
oh
You-
yeah, I'm like, oh, that was
Yeah.
27-year-old Christy.
yeah.
Sorry about that, guy.
Yeah.
I'm back on
She
track.
was not quite the same crazy.
No,
Like,
absolutely not. She was not.
but yeah, I mean, but you know what's funny? We've talked about we talked about this whole really funny YouTube video that Neil deGrasse Tyson did, and he basically was talking about one of the passages with Tesla, and he's got like a unit of measure named after him, but he also was fucking nuts.
Like half
like-
his shit doesn't
yeah.
work. It doesn't
And
make any sense.
So I basically have sat with that for a couple months since we recorded that show, and one thing that keeps coming back to my mind is the really, really, really smart people that I know or follow or listen to or whatever. If you're not wrong 50% of the time, like you're probably not in that group. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, what a Hall of Fame baseball player is only accurate 30% of the time, right?
Right.
Like that, so I don't know. There's something to be said about like this notion we live in a world where we have to be right all the time about everything. It's kind of,
You have to be a flawless human.
which is kind of crazy, right? Like I almost kind of now want to talk to the guy who's wrong 50% of the time.
See now you guys are making me go like, all right, I'll go read that. I'll go read that
now
6th
I'll
book.
finish the book.
Well, the book that really is the viewpoints, right? So here's my interpretation of that, and we can transition or we can explore deeper. But for every human being, they're truly generating their reality as the conscious observer through their lenses. So all 8 billion of us on the planet are all creating our own reality simultaneously. And in that, we all have our own interpretation of the events that are occurring, and we have commonalities, right? So that's where you see clustering, or we like the same restaurant and we have the same favorite colors and all the other parks. And so it goes, right? But each person is the observer. And it's through the lens that they're seeing their reality, which is their truth. 20 years as a paramedic, right? And I always talked about perception. If somebody fell down in front of us right now, we would all have a different interpretation or a different 911 call as to what we thought happened. Someone may say, that guy died. And someone else says, no, they just passed out. And then it's like all these multiplicities of potentialities from other people's observations, which comes through their lens, which is influenced by all things that's ever happened to them.
Which is immediately interpreted by everyone listening to them.
Oh,
Through their lens.
Through their
So,
lens,
like, now all of a sudden the story has instantly changed twice. So,
for sure. For
Right.
sure.
yeah, but you know what? Like, listen, I just want to acknowledge that I understand why you would ask about the pivot thing, because I kind of felt like we were kind of diving a little deep down the rabbit hole, but here's where I think we weren't. The reason people get into these things, talking about reality and all this other stuff we're just going into, is all based on that exact cocktail of life experiences, right? And so when we get to talk to people in this format, it's after decades of getting to that point in time where they can have the conversation. And like, that is, I think, probably more insightful than any of the mechanistic output that they could produce. Like, here's a therapy, here's a weight loss, here's a whatever. Like, yeah, okay, that stuff will all help, but that's like the doing part.
Yeah,
The motivation, the
part,
philosophy, the morality, the interpretation, the cognizant, awareness that led to that point. That's the real good stuff, right? And that's why I'm like, yeah, okay, so we went a little deep down a hole, but like clearly I have a better understanding of why you went down your little particular path,
For sure. Well, and that's what I hold to be a lot of the philosophical and theoretical side about working with ketamine, right? So if you were to take the same diagnoses, right? So say all three of us have PTSD as a diagnosis. Perhaps your PTSD comes from early onset childhood abuse, of unlovability, neglect, and some really terrible things. My PTSD comes from someone being killed in a vehicle next to me. Your PTSD comes from these outside events that have happened through the military. But all of us categorically have the same diagnoses. And so that's where we've really created this one-size-fits-all model based off of a CPT code or diagnoses, which then we try to give a pill for a one-size-fits-all model, when in reality, all of our traumas are significantly different because it happened to us at different ages, right?
Yeah.
And for the searing of an imprint, perhaps the imprint of a profound life event that was immediate and completely an upheaval versus a long 17, 18 years in an abusive and or even sexually tormentive childhood, you created different versions of yourself to simply survive.
Right.
And in that now has created the lens of your reality to where you're looking at a large majority of the population as predatory. And now there's fear, and now there's all these things. Whereas I develop crippling anxiety for any time I get on the freeway. Whereas you are now triggered by loud sounds and startle responses. And so as it pertains to the imprint of the trauma developmentally and how we were able to adapt, because we're adaptive by nature to the environment so that we could survive. And so now it's how do we unpack that as the individual, because you're also self-reporting. And so it's so fascinating to me.
The way you describe this is actually really pretty beautiful in the sense that it really does show a thorough undressing of this topic and like put back together. Like you understand the motivations at a pretty deep level. And I think that like that's gotta be sort of like I get obviously it helps in your therapeutic practice, the endeavors, but like just the way that you could either diagnose, observe, or react to somebody else's presentation. I don't know that my doctor, for example, and I have a concierge doc, and I don't even think he has that kind of empathetic lattice work that he builds our relationship on top of. He's really good. I love him. And if he ever listens to this, like, this is no knock on you, dude. Like, I like him a lot. But doctors don't really think about things, I don't think, in that way. Like, I don't feel like they're piecing it together that way.
I don't think they're trained to do that, though, Matt.
No,
I feel like that's the I feel like that's the system. It's you're presenting X, Y, and Z. This is the diagnosis. Here's the treatment. Right? It's a very linear thing, and I think and you know I'm going to mention Chinese medicine in this. But I think in a very real
we made
way.
It 22 minutes before Chinese
look,
medicine.
Man, we didn't say AI yet. We might as well get that one in there too. We've been talking about drugs this whole time, so we kind of already pressed that button.
Yeah,
but
Christy, we're laughing because every show, no matter what we do, like
all of these things come up. Matt's going to tell you he runs at some point too.
Chinese medicine, yeah.
But within that, you know, it's that looking at that whole being and not just understanding the symptoms, but the root cause of that, right?
Yeah, I was given the honor, and so I'm just gonna tag off of that. When I started building Flow, I came in with a mission to really suicidality, first responders and veterans. And there was a quote that really resonated with me, and it's like, why do we keep pulling people out of the stream instead of going upriver and figuring out why they're falling in? And so this became this mission of like, why are these suicidal ideations occurring? What is the causality, right? And how can we utilize this medicine as it pertains to the limbic system? And I could go on and on. But what I came to realize is each person is truly experiencing the lens of their trauma in this current dimension with all of these other dimensions that are truly being imprinted as their lens of reality. And so we create these false narratives, and I don't want to deduce anyone's trauma, right? But we still speak from the lens of our trauma in our current reality. And so
Sure.
when
Makes
people are
sense. That makes sense.
telling you their story, you can hear the level of the relationship to the victimization side of when imprint occurred. And when I was first building this, right, the protocols, all the things are coming, right? And in 2022, I was given the opportunity to build the first employer-driven benefit for ketamine to enter the workplace.
Wow.
Wow.
That's crazy.
And it was with Dr. Bronner's. They covered 100% of
Really?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember hearing about
No,
that. That
that's-
was you. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Thank
like
you.
what the hell, man? Like, why Dr. Bronner's? That's such a random association.
They're like they're a
It's called
crunchy
wellness.
granola hippie company, man. They're
treat their
perfect for that.
people, they treat their people so well. I mean, you want to talk about a company that truly has so much empathy and love and community. It's the oneness, right? And that's the
It's written
personality
all
it
over
all
their
down-
bottle.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all one. And so in 2022, I started building the protocols, right? And so what does it look like to cover 100% of 100%? Meaning there was no discrimination other than the ultimate contraindications as set forth by ketamine administration, which is
Okay.
active schizophrenia,
Which were what?
for sure, which are very small, relatively. And even on the medical side of it, right? Uncontrolled hypertension, and even that has varying degrees. Chronic and acute renal failure, but that also has varying degrees. And so there's really not much as a disqualifier for ketamine. But the more I worked with different diagnoses, and you can take the medical history and imprint them over each other, you can see where the point of the trauma impacts the physical and how we hold it in the body and how we start to manifest disease based off of the emotionality that's stored in the physical body from the imprint of the trauma as it pertains to the individual. This is where
Interesting. So-
Chinese medicine and Western medicine blend in the sense of Chinese medicine is absolutely incredible for the intelligence that it brings when the organ systems are cleaning and the
Oh, God, you're
meridians
just getting
and,
Tom
and
riled up over
pathways.
You know, we have a Tom guest, and then every once in a while we have a Matt guest. And I don't think we put you into a bin, but you're
Yeah.
leaning my way right now.
Yeah. I'm like, oh God, here we go. Fluff Tom's
see,
pillow. It's
You
okay.
really, I mean, and there's major contributors to this work, right? Like I spent a lot of time listening to Gabor Mate's work and Stanislav
Hungry
Grof,
Ghosts is amazing. Yeah.
as well as Bessel van der Kolk, and the body keeps the score.
Yep.
And so you start looking at these different teachers, and that's really what also fascinated me, right? Is these teachers are giving their interpretation of a specialized subject or a very specific subject to take them all and blend them into a theoretical and a philosophical approach to somebody's own intelligence, right? Like the answers are within. We just have to have the courage to go in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we spend so much time out here hoping for answers that have similarity to our exact story or our exact symptomology. And then we try to go down that for methodology. And it's like, okay, well, the answers are in here. We know that we are the most divine pharmacy, right? But we just have to get quiet enough to go within. And that's one of the access points that psychedelics bring to the table, is that you're able to see yourself from a higher state of awareness, which then results in knowingness, right? Or the wisdom from within. If somebody tells you, you're like, hey, I think you should exercise and stop eating fast food, you're like, yeah. We can come up with every excuse. But if you actually come to that realization on your own, you're like, hey, I think I'm lazy and I don't eat very good.
Mhm.
When that comes from within, you now are compelled to do something with that information. That's what psychedelics are doing. They're truly waking us up to ourselves.
And the problem that I have with that is not, I mean, I'm a huge psychedelics fan, trust me. I microdose, I've practiced for years and years and years. I love this topic. I love doing it. I love everything about it. However, I only like it to the degree that I do because I let that initial experience happen. And I think that it's really hard. If let's say I go like, I don't know, water skiing for the first time, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I had the greatest time in the world. There's like vocabulary that we can use to describe water skiing, right? Like the water's kind of cold, you're kind of sliding on top, you got a life vest on. I mean, there's physical things we can use to describe.
Mm-hmm.
How the fuck do you describe a full psychedelic experience? It's impossible. The only words to describe it come within the experience itself. So like I can almost not even have this conversation with somebody who hasn't
done it. Yeah.
Because they don't actually know what I'm saying. Like the words don't have any meaning. It's not their fault. There's just no meaning behind anything I'm saying.
Right. It's like after the first session and you sit there quietly waiting for someone or waiting for the person to language their experience. And it's like, did you go to the universe?
Right.
You're like,
yeah, I did.
But you can't say that beforehand.
No, because you know what happens if you do?
That doesn't mean anything.
They're like, so on second thought, I'm going to not do this today, so I'll talk to you later.
You know what? That Christi, speaking of the vocabulary around this, I heard about the hyperspace lexicon, which was like an online version where people would say, "Oh, did you see this? Did you meet this? Did you have this experience?" And then they would like thumbs up and thumbs down it, like on Reddit. And the terms that like survived were almost not like a universal experience, but a lot of like enough people experienced them to say, yes, this is something that we can kind of agree on, almost making their own mythos around the whole thing, which is kind of really cool, to have that, to be able to have that conversation with other people who are experienced with it.
For sure.
Christi, you're into ketamine, but it seems like you've got a lot of information on various other ones too. Like, can you talk to me about how you separate these out, or like why ketamine for this? Like, can you walk us into that a little?
Well,
yeah, and maybe its effect on the limbic system specifically as well too. We can nerd out.
Ketamine's legal.
Sure. Yeah. I love where you start, man. Fuck. All right, let's start here.
And we're hoping for some big esoteric answer. And
No, ketamine's legal.
Yeah.
How do you help the most people in the most legal way by actually allowing them to use their insurance policies and to not have it be so expensive that it's unobtainable?
Yeah, the literal lowest hanging fruit here. I mean, really.
It's the most direct method.
Yeah, for sure. And with that, it works so beautifully in the limbic system. And for simplicity terms, right? The limbic system is what we share with all species. That's where survival comes in as a mechanism. So what does that mean? It means that the limbic system is one of the first entry points from how the body's perceiving the environment.
Makes sense.
And so if we have, and it also is an acquisition center, right? If you look at the limbic system as a whole, it's an acquisition center for all stored memories. You look at the hippocampus, you look at the amygdala, and it's like, have you ever seen the movie Inside Out?
Yeah.
Long-term
I fucking love that movie.
I do too. It's such a great depiction, right? And so we literally store all of these events in the mind. And then as we go through life, right, we're truly perceiving the environment nanoseconds before we can actually come up with anything in our prefrontal cortex for thought, right? And so this becomes important to just contemplate, because if my body's perceiving the environment and I've been through some trauma or traumatic experiences, then it's fair to say that I'm perceiving fear as the first imprint of what I'm thinking. And then it filters through all of our life experiences and gets to our prefrontal cortex, and we make a decision. And so when you're able to pull the limbic system out of the equation temporarily, it allows the body to have so many different benefits. The pituitary gland is able to come back online and scan as the master gland. Circadian rhythm, testosterone, all systems start to normalize and stabilize because we're no longer full throttle in survival as a feeling and as a way that we're being. we can show through just thought alone that we can throttle our system exponentially. Look how much we're burning through our adrenal glands. I mean, I could go on and on about what we're.
We actually had Dr. Martin Moore on the show, who led the team at Harvard in the 80s. More Eid. We messed that up one other time. Who basically led the team at Harvard doing the circadian rhythm studies back in the 80s. And like some of the shit he dropped on us was like just absolutely mind blowing, that we have this like very mechanical like relationship to the world, and like when we ignore that, shit goes sideways.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. How? Christi, you were talking about the amygdala there, and I'm gonna ask this because I know in neurotheology, when like these spiritual experiences, right, have a big effect in the amygdala, right, and they can be terrifying if we flood, I believe, the left amygdala, but then sometimes there's a spillover to the right amygdala, and then it becomes this blissful. And I hope I don't have my sides reversed, but what is ketamine? I hate to use the word physically, but what is the word ketamine doing in that limbic system specifically that allows this reaction to take place?
Well, if we can imagine the limbic system as it pertains to the default mode network.
Okay.
So now we're searing, or we have these searing life events, or we've fired and wired, right? Over and over. We think, we feel, we feel, we think, we think, we feel, we feel, we think, as it pertains to all the experiences that we've ever had over our lifetime. That becomes a network. That becomes a program. And so when you disengage from that program, now we can show that it's like a collateral circulation, but it's through neuro engorgement, right? And so as new ways of thinking come online, because ketamine is a mirror molecule, it's now allowing you to witness. I'm going to pull in phantom limb pain here real quick, just as a
do it. Let's do it.
Right?
Why not?
For people who have lost limbs, you can take a sagittal mirror and show the brain or show the person who's lost the limb, but they have to witness it through the mirror for the brain to register that the limb is no longer there, and phantom limb pain disappears.
Wow.
See, in Chinese medicine, Matt, they roll up a towel and place it where that limb would be and literally put the needles in the acupuncture points to treat the phantom itself, to get rid of the pain, which seems like
almost the same idea, like making your body aware.
It is exactly it. I'm making your body aware that that's not there, and it's that is crazy.
And so, if
by the way, 7 Experiments That'll Change the World does some crazy stuff with phantom limb.
Really,
great book. Really easy read too.
That's beautiful. So if we were to look at the mirror molecule, right, if you were to go within, because you're in, you have a mindfold on, I mean, you're sensory deprived for the most part, right? And now you're able to witness that default mode network from a higher state of consciousness, no longer through the lens of the experiencer, right?
So you've transcended that spot.
Yes. And now we're witnessing it from a higher state of consciousness. And when you can witness it, that's the collapsing of it. You can watch people collapsing timelines. You witness the ego dissolution or ego death when people are on the precipice of evolving from a version of themselves that no longer serves them.
Yeah.
You witness so many beautiful things that start to occur naturally, but through the brain's own recognition of its acquisition center of all the stored imprints in us neurologically, physiologically, atomically, cellularly, molecularly. It goes on and on and on, right? And that's the beauty of where ketamine truly meets each person where they're ready to be met. And so if we were to go full circle, it meets the consciousness, or your consciousness meets you. You're able to see your unconsciousness. You're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have 3 phones.
But you know what's interesting about that? I think that like we all, what was that movie? I forget what they said. Like a person is a rational kind human being. People are dumb and irrational, you know? So like, I feel like any singular person, if you isolated them from the pack, pulled the gazelle off to the side
Mm-hmm.
and allowed them to look from the outside in,
Yeah.
most people, I think, in most cases, could see that is a little crazy or a little off center, right? But nobody does any of the work to get there, because most people, again, going back to what we were talking about a minute ago, people just don't even think that it's a possibility. And so speaking to somebody from the other side of that gap, Christi, I'd love to know if you've ever experienced this, but like, I've had a lot of experience with it, with my journey, and talking to people who've had no experience is actually getting more difficult the more experience I have with it, because you're like, life is so pretty on this side that I almost don't even want to waste a moment of the precious time I have on this planet engaging with people who can't also appreciate the things that are beautiful over here. And I know that sounds super douchey to say, but like, I kind of feel like that's where I'm going with it. Like, it feels like too much to not do that.
It's the shape shifting, right? And so how do you embody the experiences, the wisdom, and the medicine, and hold space for those who are still very much infantile in those experiences? And then one must ask themselves why we're participating with individuals who can't hear us, which is another, you know what I mean? Like, it's a very fascinating area, right?
Oh yeah,
I truly hold containers for a large majority, or for different types of people. And the medicine meets them where they're ready to be met, and it's developmental. And so as the practitioner, how do you transition through those levels of consciousness so that you can have relatability? And so at least a practice for me, Matt, is to truly have that relatability of when I didn't understand either. And then that's where you can ask yourself, what is the conversation, or how does it even get directed there? Unless people directly ask me, I don't even open it up.
Sure. No, but I mean, yeah, I get it. But I guess I was asking because you have a front row seat to, I suppose, a wide berth of types of people, right? You've got the all in, like, I'm jumping in, no life vest, nothing, to the people that are like, I really don't want to do this, but I know I kind of have to do something, and you're kind of a last resort, right? So like, I can, and probably every shade of gray in between, right? And so I would think personally that would take a Herculean act of volition on my part to be able to constantly recruit that empathy, because all I want to do is live fully on the other side of that chasm, right? Like, I almost don't want to go back. I'm actually almost terrified to go back, right? It's like,
well, you can never go back. That's also true, right? You would never be able to go back to old self unless you really tried, and you'd have to lower your consciousness and your vibration, and it would be so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Paradoxically, I'd have to do a lot more psychedelics to go back to
You'd
that.
have to probably start having drinking.
Yeah.
And so with that, to hold space in consciousness is where I really healed so much of my being. I've spent thousands of hours just sitting in that energy of sharing consciousness with the person who's tapping into their innate intelligence. And so what that's done, it's not only the mirroring for me, right? But you're able to hold a conscious container to where they have the ability to access more information. And what they do with that is up to them. That's the variable it's like the big elephant in the room, right? It's about what are we doing to integrate it?
Right.
The medicine can show you the most incredible, mystical things about yourself and about love and about connection and community, but then we can go right back home to the same and never do anything with it.
So you're talking about the integration in that case. Yeah.
Which we know is like sort of the big difference between when I was taking acid in college and you know, what we do
Yeah,
now.
yeah, you're not at a fish show. Yeah.
I'm not at a fit show anymore, right? Like, and like that's a different kind of experience. Not only is it a different kind of experience, but that integration part is what lets you really see that beauty we were just talking about, right? Like, I mean, the beauty can only be seen once you actually kind of interpret what the fuck just happened.
Yeah. You have to
You know,
be
'cause-
You know
Yeah.
what? And Christy, you touched on something so amazing there, talking about you sitting in, thousands of hours, right? And Hawkins mentioned like being around somebody that's enlightened, right? That raises your vibration level. But you're in there with somebody that's like free flowing at that point, let's call it.
Yeah.
And because you're in proximity, your vibration also goes up too, which is, it was such an amazing thing. And oh God,
That's
it's
also
such a cool conversation.
Oh my.
and like that might be a good sort of segue. Like, I want to hear a little bit more about
we
the
want to make
flow.
sure we can hear. Yeah.
I want to hear about the flow stuff. I mean, honestly, I feel like this is just kind of cruising by here, and I definitely don't want to get all the way before we talk about that.
Yeah, people, they don't like listening more than an hour.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not enough of our audience does psychedelics.
Not enough of our audience.
Well, that truly is the philosophy behind it, right? Is flow.
Yeah, no, totally.
To where to start, right? So the medicine meeting each person where they're ready to be met. This is the unpacking or the debriding. And I share with people often, they're like, well, how many numbers of sessions? And it's like, well, first we take into consideration your victimization story, and not to deduce anyone's trauma, like I made mention before, but how attached are we to it? If we come in and we say, well, I'm this way because 30 years ago this happened, well, then we're going to unpack 30 years of these identities that you've created through some major developmental periods in your life,
right,
that have also resulted in karmic things because of the choices we've made when we were in our trauma. And then what's the depth of the unconsciousness? The body is the unconscious mind. And so now if we've manifested autoimmunity and we have all these other multiplicities and our gut is stagnated, we're having these robust conversations, but we're having it as they become aware of it. So it's not too much too soon, in the sense of, as the provider, to not just barrage them with information. It's to truly allow them to open up that consciousness to receive the information of like, okay, well, what's the next steps? Well, even with that being said, you have to take that and go home with it.
Sure.
And so each person, we really have built a beautiful protocol to where we honor N of one. It's self-reporting.
There's another bell we can
We made it
press.
47 minutes. 47 minutes before we heard the N of one.
Before I have one.
Yeah, got it. It might be a world record, Christy.
That's probably the longest we've done on this show.
Well, that's
We've
awesome.
joked about renaming the podcast to N of one because we say it just so much.
You have to take into consideration the individual.
Sure.
And it's so beautiful to witness what the self-realizations, right? So many people out there don't have a sense of self. We've spent so much of our majority blaming, shaming, judging, looking outside of ourselves. I've worked with clients who have never looked in the mirror before.
Wow. That's next level right there.
And so where do you start with that?
Yeah.
And you start really gently with, I would encourage you to look in the mirror and just see what it feels like to say, I love you.
Right.
And then
Which
you have
sounds so rudimentary, but at the same time, if you've never done it or have done it very little, like,
Right. And then you have other people. Right. Then you have others that are like, look, I've taken 10 years of this medication. I got off of it naturally. I've done a gut repair. I've done a parasite repair. I've repaired, you know what I mean? They're doing all these things. They're like, and now I want to see the blind spots. Like, here it is. And so you have these paradigms or these shifts, right? But that's all the different dimensionality. Because all of us are creating our own reality through our own lenses. And that's where the medicine truly meets each person so beautifully. And it's developmental, which gives practitioners the opportunity to then plant or really nurture seeds of how to repair oneself Some it's food, some it's mood, some it's behavior, some it's perversions, distractions, distortion, whatever it is. And sometimes it's all of that.
Right. I'm going to ask you a question here, though. Like, how hard is it, or how much better do you think, I'll fluff your ego here a little bit. How much easier is it for a person like you with this profound sense of all of this stuff to do, and more efficient you can be with your clients versus somebody who might have just taken a weekend ayahuasca trip and now decided that they're like ready to be like a ketamine coach, right? Like, and I feel like right now, just to tip our hats to the sort of darker side of this industry, there's a lot of Instagram echo chamber nut jobs out there.
I know a bunch of people that have been shamans for a hot minute.
Yeah, right. And so, like, unfortunately, for every Christi Myers, there's 10 knuckleheads out there doing possibly actual
I just
damage.
got back from Peru, and now...
Yeah, and now, you know.
Well, the trauma spills over, right? It's fascinating, you guys. I can look back on podcasts that I did in 2020, and I can hear the difference in my nervous system from how fast I was speaking and developmentally. And there's versions of me that no longer exist.
Wow.
And that's because of me holding my own space and becoming this version. To truly hold that sacred space and to witness everyone as a mirror, and more specifically through my children. So I've truly stepped into and the embodiment of what it means to be continuously evolving as a sentient being. And I'm only 44 years in.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But you know what's funny, just as a general observation, I found that most people that we talk to that are really very passionate and very like aware of what they're talking about tend to be 40 to 60. There's like the sweet spot
I
window.
feel like there's enough when in the old days we'd be considered very old, and we should have some modicum of wisdom by now. Christi, I want to make sure we talk about how you're helping physicians kind of transition into this, and God, if you're helping acupuncturists too, I would love that information. But please go ahead and spill the beans on that.
100%. And so how do we take this? People would ask me all the time, they're like, how do you replicate you? And it's like, well, it's through the intellectual side of what's been created and birthed as the contribution back to humanity to reduce suffering and impact consciousness. And it birthed the licensing. And so I've taken everything that I've learned over this last decade of working with this medicine and the last 4 years really intimately serving the medicine, and wrote protocols for so many different variabilities based off of the clinical presentation. What does it look like for a person with OCD who's never done any kind of psychedelics but has all the different variables to truly allow practitioners to step into serving this medicine without such a steep learning curve? It's not a one-size-fits-all model.
Right.
There's a protocol out there right now that is a one-size-fits-all model. Every other day, you do 0.5 milligrams of ketamine, and you do this and you do this. And there's benefit, but it's for a certain specificity of people. It's major depressive disorder, and they all have the same body mass index.
Right. It's
not a one-size-fits-all. I built a non-linear, non-local model that impacts consciousness developmentally through the individual. And I brought in all the variables with pharmaceuticals as it pertains to your advancement or your relationship to having ever done a psychedelic. And to take all of that and truly empower practitioners to be able to serve this medicine with more confidence, and also how to sit with it. So that's the other thing that's happening right now. There's there's practitioners who serve this medicine, and you're in a room by yourself. That's not in the highest good, right? If you ask me. Because if you get scared in there, or you're sitting in there and no one's holding your space, Yeah, I can tell you more stories around what it feels like to get lost in the medicine or to have a poor experience and nobody's there to help guide you.
Right, right.
And so to really pay attention to the facilitator protocols so that we can show up trauma informed and have anticipatories. But all of that was birthed based off the gift that I was given to work with Dr. Bronner's and truly build the first employer-driven benefit for ketamine to be in the workplace.
Which is just so cool that, like, you know, you see like one crack in the system that lets light through, and you're like, okay, might take us a minute, but we're on our way now.
But there's something.
Once officially we're on our way.
Genie doesn't go back in the bottle.
Yeah, no, 100% not.
I mean, this conversation is giving me hope, man. I think I hate to say that, man. Like, you know.
Christy, I actually remembered where I think we met. Were we introduced through Casey Garrett? No. So I guess not. But she's actually coming on the show at the end of the month. And she is doing a microdosing for healing kind of thing. And again, it's just like another one of those things where, and I thought we were connected to, I wasn't trying to bring her into the conversation. Otherwise, I thought we might have been introduced, but she is also a woman in her 40s dealing with, I mean, it's like a very, again, this theme kind of like repeats, right? Like it's like this age of enlightenment happens, but it can't happen before 40. It has to happen after 40. You need 40 years.
I feel like there's gotta be almost a hormonal shift starting. And I'm not going to say menopause because I think it happens in men too.
Yeah, like where you're just like, I don't know, something's different, and I don't know.
Something's different, and I also don't give a shit about the stuff I cared about before.
And Christy, I couldn't have had this. I'm 48. I could not have had this conversation at the same level at 38, for sure. Like, there's just no way I would have not even had vocabulary to even have this conversation, right? So I think some of it is just you stack up enough life shit behind you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, but
you suffer a little bit. Sometimes you suffer a lot of it.
Right. Yeah. It's, I mean, but listen, you know, it's funny. I went to art school, right? And art school is all about like setting you up to failure to see how well you can succeed under really weird circumstances, right? And so like, I've always loved this sort of challenge, right? Where you're like, okay, odds are stacked up, man. This doesn't look good. How do we make something better out of this than what is at face value? And the answer to that question, as it turns out, is a podcast and a whole bunch of really fucking cool people who get to come on and talk about shit on that podcast about what.
Yeah, I feel like you know, this definitely raises our vibration. You know,
yeah, 100%. And every time, I mean, I joke. I mean, I do technology for the whole week, and then on Thursday night and Friday morning we get to do the show, and it's like the brightest, like, area of the week, not because I don't love what I do, but because it truly does, just talking about it helps me reevaluate my own worldview. It helps me sort of contribute to your worldview, and Tom gets to contribute to our worldview. You know, like everybody's sort of like, really, it is a rising tide raises all boats situation. And then tomorrow you wake up and you get to like integrate that into every tomorrow you ever have. And that's a thing that people living a regular, statistically average American lifestyle, they don't do. And I don't even want to throw Americans under the bus. I think that's a worldwide thing.
Worldwide issue, yeah.
You know, and I loved what you said earlier, that psychedelics are opening up these doorways, because fuck yes, they are. That is exactly what they're doing, right? Like, I mean,
well, all of us have done DMT that are on Earth currently. So if we think
which I love, by the way, I've never heard that before.
Well, yeah, I mean, supposedly babies are just tripping balls all day.
Right? And breast milk has the most prevalence, right? If we were to chemically look or break it down. And of course, near-death experiences. If you look at John Dean out of UCSD, he shows the latency, and he also shows the abundance upon cardiac arrest and how it's just bolused upon death. So there's 2 times in our lifetime, whether we want to say that we've been psychedelic or not. And also, the word psychedelic, in the beginning, people were like, you need to change the name. It's not psychedelic. Don't say it. It's triggering. And I'm like, well, let's break it down. the word psychedelic means to make manifest.
Right. So you can call it something else, but
Sleep is essentially psychedelic if you're in a dreamscape, right?
Sure.
You're in an altered state of consciousness when we go to sleep. And so it's just this interesting relationship about just the word, right? And how imprinting that can be. But to truly allow yourself to experience a higher state of consciousness and to go within, right? To put a mindfold on, to have some beautiful music and to truly embody the medicine, we're slowly waking up this latent system.
Right.
And for some of us, we don't know how to do drugs, right? If you've ever blackout drunk, you don't know how to drink.
Right.
How fun it was, right? Like
On that day, you were an abject failure at drinking. Yes.
But we've normalized so many different ways of these altered states of consciousness, but yet we worry about this cute little mushroom or what it looks like to have ketamine IV or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, when you have courage to go within and to see what those answers are as they innately live in you, that's where life transforms. That's where we evolve.
Right.
And in that evolution, the byproduct of that is we reduce suffering. We are kinder people.
Sure.
We have a stronger connection and community. We want to show up differently in our lives, and that's the ripple effect.
And you know when I'm the most like that outside of a chemically assisted state? Right after like an Ironman. When I got done with, I've done a bunch of them and I love it. I haven't done one in a while, but here's the thing. I don't run with headphones or swim with headphones or anything. So I have 14 hours of me time paired with and Venn diagrammed against a lot of physical exertion from a neurochemical standpoint. It's a fucking Macy's Day Parade in my head, right? Like it's going every which way. But guess what happens at the end of that? When you finish that and the dopamine rush just floods over your whole body because you know you're done. It's just the cherry on top. You've actually gone through, I'm convinced there is a psychedelic component to doing these kinds of hardcore things because when you have no social media, no news, no text messages, no emails, no nothing, no music, no nothing except for the wind going through past your ears, and you're just physically like pouring yourself into it, you don't need chemicals. That is a fucking religious experience if there ever is one.
We are the chemicals, right?
We are the chemicals. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
You're literally manufacturing them.
And that's that's why I'm like, I love what you're saying when you're saying looking inward and taking this like sensory deprived thing. After like 6 hours of exercising, you have tunnel vision. My eyesight's this big. Like there's nothing more sensory deprived than that, right? Like, I mean, outside of covering my face, I guess, but like, it's not like I'm indulging in like that.
You know, a great contributor to the ketamine field was John C. Lilly, who also came up with the float tanks, which is sensory deprivation, which is kind of amazing.
Right. And there's no drugs involved in that. And that shit'll make you
know. And that first time I did that, I went, holy shit, I had a religious experience.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
That shamanic breathing that we did with was
nuts.
I mean, I've never felt like that in my entire life. And when I was done, the biggest takeaway was, fuck, I did this myself. Like I did this to me.
Yeah.
You know, what is so crazy is the fact that like DMT is in almost everything, right? And having shamans realize that it breaks down too quick and that we can literally add one other plant to this mix and get ayahuasca, which is freaking nuts. But yet, like, we literally, if we didn't break it down so quick, we'd be walking around in that state that Christi's talking about all the time.
Right. And who's to say that that's not part of the ascension that we're cultivating as a station?
Right.
Once we evolve from the limbic system, right? Right.
No, we're going to go another 2 hours if I ask the question. I have to ask the question, Christi. We might have to have you back to have this discussion.
Love that.
But if we surpass, if we abandon, if we evolve past the limbic system, which is that primitive brain, is that just pure consciousness? What is that?
We're
You
not
know?
ready for that answer.
We're not ready. I don't think we're ready for that as long as we're still just these primate bodies.
We're not even in a level 1 civilization yet.
Yeah, I know.
If anything, Earth's going to eradicate us and be like, start again, guys.
Right.
But with that being said, it's to the varying degrees of how we wake up the latent system inside of us. And that's what I was making mention about, even the blackout drunk, right? Like you can go overboard. So if you go and the first time you experience mushrooms, you want to eat a hero's dose because you want that ego death, you're going to have an experience of all the things that you've stored neurologically, and you're going to have it for 4 to 6 hours, maybe 8. But if you start with small doses and you start teaching your body how to work with medicine, right? If you look at like the dietas for the Amazonians and the Shabiba and all of the indigenous cultures, they diet with the medicine. And so that philosophically, or that's how I also work with embodying ketamine. You start with, you're introducing yourself to the medicine. You're becoming comfortable and familiar with, and then you're increasing. You're learning how to surrender. You're softening the physical body, and you're having deeper and deeper experiences. And each time you do, there's new information rather than this sledgehammer or wrecking ball coming in. And now you're trying to integrate all the suffering you ever caused anybody in your whole lifetime in a blink of a DMT pen.
Yeah, but you know what? That's
all right. I
that's
won't
the
lie.
typical dumb person answer. They're
I
like,
might have a DMT pen sitting within
I
a
was
few
just gonna
feet of
say,
me.
I may be holding a DMT pen right now.
You know, but I love, Christi, I love the fact that we're taking a modern compound and you're combining traditional knowledge, traditional wisdom with that, right? You're really, you're looking at it from the 9,000 foot high view of like, how many different interpolations can we have of this? How many different people may be coming to this medicine and what are their specific needs? And I feel that is something that all traditional practices really, you know, they think about that, right? When that shaman is taking care of that community, they're thinking of every individual in that community, not just how do we make a buck at this?
Right.
Here's your kit, here's your blindfold, here's the headphones, go.
Yeah. Or some are even letting you watch YouTube videos, or you're watching nature shows and you're still distorting and distracting out here. You're not going in.
Oh God. I think getting high and watching nature shows sounds amazing. But I get your point that it is not spiritually evolving
that's
you.
recreational, right? You'd be amazed at how much I've even transitioned that, right? Like, what is the recreational side or the intention? For me, to witness the power of dimensions. So when you open up the mind, dimensionality is very much a real thing. And so if you're in other people's energy, there's potentiality. Energy it just changes form, right?
Yeah.
Destroyed. And so if somebody is releasing trauma and you're open, is there a potential that you could absorb somebody else's trauma?
I think so.
That's 100% Chinese medicine as well. But
yeah. Tom wears an umbrella when he does.
Look, man, there's rules. Believe it or not, there's certain rules. Hey, we do this protocol. You don't cross the feet.
Yep.
Now, like, I can say I don't believe in any of that bullshit. But you know what? It's a hell of a lot easier for me to go around the other way from the table.
Yeah.
Like that. Like
just
maybe there's something to it. Maybe there's not. But you know what? I don't cross the fucking feet.
Yeah.
Well, think about even touching the energy that's at the tips of the needles.
Yeah.
I didn't understand energy hygiene, and my practice is still always evolving.
Yeah.
Because we're off-gassing.
Yeah. A lot of this, Christi, at least from my experience, it is self-cultivation, right? And that took me a long time. You know, my mentor was like hammering that into my head. Like, look, you don't go, like, especially when you're moving into that psycho-emotional realm, right? We can call it, we talk about it as functionally as we possibly can if we wanted to. But there's still this, like, here's how you cultivate yourself so that doesn't get you.
Right.
right? And in a lot of ways that the Amazonian tribes would talk about the dieta and the practices, right? There's a cultivation there too.
For
And I
sure.
feel like that is lacking from American practitioners. And I hate to say that because like they'll swing at me all day too. And
Well,
that's why my nose is crooked.
if we look, right, if we just look at dysregulation,
Mhm.
that's the anxiety in the body. The energy
Yeah.
doesn't have an exit point.
Right.
Like, how long has it been since you physically grounded? Have your feet touched earth, or do they just stay indoors on carpet? And so,
Tom's feet are on a grounding mat
But I
right now.
literally have a grounding mat under me right now.
Yeah.
I sit on a grounding mat for sure.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm holding space all day. Like, how do I ground? I intentionally ground myself in between clients, and there's a lot of things that come
Yeah.
in. But if the average human has never met their nervous system before, and
Right.
now we have all this dysregulation, which is
Wow.
presenting as anxiety, you have to be very delicate with the way that you allow them to witness it, because some people don't even know they have a nervous system. To be able to show somebody a picture of what the nervous system looks like when you remove everything else, you're like, well, here's it as a whole, and yours to be that dysregulated, right? The way that it throttles us, heart-brain connection, the
Mhm.
VQ mismatch from the way that we're breathing against our heart, that we're dysregulated. And then we try to grab medication that dysregulates our dysregulation,
Right.
that causes a temporary relief. And even that temporary relief has this rebound repercussion. So now it's
Yeah.
like we try to soothe it, and that's where, central nervous system comes in, and alcohol is one of the major mechanisms we grab as a species to dysregulate our dysregulation.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I just finished an absinthe, so now now I feel guilty about that.
So, Christy, I hope you accept our invitation to come back, but I do think we could literally talk until
God,
next Tuesday. So I have to be the bigger person out of Tom and I and say we got to stop at some point.
Look, man, it's normally me going, Matt, we got to wrap this
Yeah,
up.
we gotta
People are
wrap it
falling
up.
off, and
Yeah.
we just. To echo Matt's statement before, we have so many amazing conversations, and like we would hang out with like 95% of you.
Yeah.
Like we'd be like, you guys want to go hang out somewhere?
Yeah.
Because it's just it is truly a blessing to get to talk to people that like are at least in your general proximity, energetically, whatever you want to call it, and it's super cool. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it was very cool talking to you. I will say that when I talk to people like you, it makes me really happy that I've been doing kind of the work on my side, because as we all know, we just went through an election cycle here, and I don't know about the two of you, but I had a real tough time with this, not because of my own personal issues, but because of everyone around me. And I was like absorbing this hyper polarized negativity from every angle. And I was
you can feel it. You can feel it. It's palpable.
And here's the thing, Christy, doing that work that you're doing and doing it to yourself and me doing it and anyone who does it makes it so that you don't fucking have to contribute to that conversation. Like, I sat very dispassionately on the outside of that conversation, which drove everyone I talked to fucking crazy.
How do you not have an opinion?
How are you not as angry as
how
I am
not
about?
How are you not as mad as I am about this? I thought you were evolved, Matt.
Yeah, right. I mean, do you see what I'm saying, Christy? I mean, it's like, yeah.
Well, I find it fascinating how much energy we give other people. Like when my son and daughter, they're my greatest teachers, right? And I'm like, well, why does he have so much power over you to influence your mood in that way? Like how much power we give to other people.
Sure.
We don't even know.
Oh, yeah.
We do it with all of these people that are idolized for throwing balls. We do it for so many different iterations.
Yeah, totally.
And in reality, we're just sitting back here quarterbacking, right? We're just watching somebody else do what we're not willing to do, but we're going to judge it. It's kind of silly, right? It just goes to show how much energy we give to something that It isn't to go within and to cultivate love. I'm going to hold my frequency all day long so that can be the ripple effect.
Sure. And actually, adding to that, I think it's also pretty shocking how quickly we abdicate that energy to those people. Like
Matt was wrapping this conversation up, starting a new one.
No, I'm just saying it's like that's exactly that. I think that
I love this show, man.
I think that drives the whole thing home in my mind, right? Like we have the show to talk about the people who don't abdicate easily that energy to other things, right? People that are like taking a commanding presence in their direction. And to hear somebody who's like not just doing that for themselves, but actually really emboldening other people to do it, it's sort of like just reaffirms why we have these conversations in the first place, like period. Yeah. And you know what I mean? It's like, okay, cool. Then we hit the nail on the head. That was fucking awesome. But, let's just keep doing that like for forever and ever. But yeah, I'd love to come back. We actually are exploring an idea of maybe having group conversations with some other people. There's
God, you'd be amazing with Dre Wright and everybody. Yeah, like
a Cambo guy on. Oof.
Oh yeah.
I'm getting lunch with him next week. So
right. And Christy, you're out in Encinitas, yeah?
Yes.
Yes. My other company is domiciled in Encinitas, actually.
I love that. Yeah.
Love that area. I'm from North Bay, so the other California, but still.
Yeah.
So Christy, where do we find you? How do we tell people where to go? Where to go?
Hit us with your links.
You know what? I erased all social media.
Love it.
Good for you.
Fucking love it. So
good for you.
Is there an website address or a MySpace place that we could go reach you at?
Can we? Is there a PO box we could mail you at?
Right. Well, you can go to my website. So my clinic has the access points for you to call or text or even email me. I very much answer the phone, and I'm very much present for this medicine.
Christy, let's say the website, please. Let's like vocalize that. It helps with people.
Integrativeketamine.com.
Cool.
Yeah. And then, of course, you can also find me on LinkedIn and message me there for when I do check in on that side of it. But otherwise, the website's going to go direct to me.
Perfect.
The business phone number is 909-735-FLOW.
Love it.
Love it. That's great. The vanity number. I love it. Yes.
And you know what? I mean...
The universe.
I actually, the very first TikTok account that I ever had was last week when I had to sign up for it because we launched a TikTok channel for the show and I couldn't see it unless I had a TikTok account. And I went downstairs with this look on my face. My kids, I have a 16 and a 13-year-old, are like TikTok obsessed. And I put my phone sullenly on the counter and I was like, guys, today's a bad day. And they're like, why? What happened? Who died? Whatever. And I'm like, your dad got a TikTok account. And the first thing they said, like, what's your handle? I'm like, fuck, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. I thought I was going to go through entire life without a TikTok account, but apparently.
Right.
Look, man, I got a Blue Sky now.
Oh, Jesus. I
don't even know how to do it. Like, a friend messaged me and she's like, you said that publicly. And I'm like, oh, I'm that guy.
Yeah, totally. I have no shame. No shame here, man. None whatsoever.
All right, Christy, this will be an overnight thing. Yeah.
We really appreciate it. Totally serious. I'd love to have you back and let's do a round two on this. This is amazing.
And thank you for everyone listening. The seeds planted and we'll keep watering them.
Seeds planted for sure. Great. All right, guys, have a great weekend and talk to you soon.
Peace.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.